This is Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman is a former UFC middleweight champion in his late 30s trying to get back to the title picture. Chris's story is nothing new from the outset. A guy in the later part of his athletic career looking to reach the top one last time before Father Time tells him that the dream is over and it's time to call it a day. Chris Weidman's mental approach to this dilemma, however, is a very unique one.
And this is still my boy!
Self-belief is one of the best traits you can have. In fact, one could argue that self-motivation, a healthy self-esteem, and self-confidence are the absolute best qualities a person can have as to both themselves and to others, as they are exactly who they say they are, and you know full well that when they say they're going to do something, that they'll do it. Early in his career, Chris Weidman was the epitome of this philosophy. Entering the UFC with only 4 professional fights under his belt, a little under 2 years later, Weidman was fighting against the greatest middleweight of all time with only 9 professional fights under his belt. Chris knew he was destined to beat Anderson Silva. He never buckled under the pressure and kept his focus throughout the buildup on this monumental undertaking. We all know that Weidman beat Silva. We all know he beat him again later that year. We know both fights had very controversial endings, but no one can seriously say Weidman was losing any part of either fight before its conclusion. 2 subsequent title bouts with Lyoto Machida and Vitor Belfort showed that Weidman was indeed the real deal and backed up all that self-belief and self-confidence Weidman had within himself. However, fast forward half a decade and this self-belief and self-confidence within Weidman has turned from an admirable trait of knowing one's strength to one of almost pitiful delusion and eye-rolling dismissal. How did this happen? Well... So, after defeating Belfort in quick succession in 2015, Weidman went on to fight Luke Rockhold for his 4th title defense. Unlike Weidman's previous title fights, Rockhold was a younger, fresher, and more hungry opponent. Anderson Silva, Lyoto Machida, and Vitor Belfort were all older Brazilian legends of the sport. Luke had all the confidence and arrogance of a young and hungry contender looking to make his mark on the sport's landscape. And while the fight was indeed incredibly competitive, Chris's self-belief got the best of him. And while he had momentum on a fading Rockhold in the 3rd round, he attempted the worst timed spinning back kick ever attempted. Rivaled only in the bad spinning shit pantheon by Chael Sonnen's spinning back fist against Anderson Silva at UFC 148. Chris was countered, taken down, and absolutely destroyed by Rockhold for the remainder of the round. He was beaten so bad you could have argued that the round could have been a 10-7. A round in which Herb Dean's bloodlust needed to be satiated so that he could masturbate furiously to it later that night for several hours. Somehow Weidman made it out of that round but was quickly finished off by Rockhold in the 4th. It was Chris's first loss, and while it was ugly, surely he'd bounce back and be right back at the top of the division, right? Well... So here we are 5 years later, and Chris has only won 2 fights and has lost an additional 4, with 3 of those losses coming via brutal knockout. And the 2 wins in question, while showing signs of his previous strengths, also showed glaring holes in Weidman's game that had been seen in his previous fights as well, namely poor striking defense and cardio issues. Now Chris is 36 years old, and at this point, unless he buys supplements from his old friend Vitor Belfort, I don't think the Chris Weidman of old is showing up anytime soon. And if Chris still had aspirations of greatness but realistically stuck to a career path that would allow him to climb back to his former glory, I likely wouldn't be making this video. However, Weidman has carried this notion of self-belief and confidence with him into this later twilight of his career, where he has begun making ridiculous claims that he can dethrone the new hotness in the UFC, undefeated middleweight champion, and as of this video, number 3 ranked pound for pound, Israel Adesanya, and that he is a nightmare matchup for him. This is off the heels of Weidman's last win, a mediocre affair against solid yet unremarkable Omari Akhmedov, a fight that didn't really inspire much public confidence in Weidman other than the notion that he still belonged in the sport and could at least be competitive. The sentiment that Chris has in himself that he is the last stylebender's kryptonite is constantly being mocked on social media and widely dismissed by MMA journalists nearly unanimously. In the mind of Weidman, this could possibly feel like deja vu when he was a young, up-and-coming fighter and faced the same kind of criticisms of claiming that he was the man to finally dethrone Anderson Silva. Silva. However, the difference is back then we didn't really have a body of evidence to support our own sentiments one way or another with Chris. We didn't know how great Weidman could be back then. This situation is completely different. There is clear evidence in all of his losses, and even in his wins, that Weidman's chin simply isn't what it used to be. Not only that, but Weidman's gas tank looks more questionable than ever now, and his pressure grappling doesn't seem as dominant as it once was. These are all glaring problems that Israel Adesanya would absolutely use to chew Weidman's ass up alive.
You better win your fight, because I'm coming on your ass, boy.
Not only that, but looking too far ahead instead of realistically looking in front of him has already gotten Weidman in trouble before. In 2019, Weidman decided to move up to light heavyweight with the sole purpose of wanting to challenge Jon Jones for the title. He wasn't looking at any other contenders in the division, he just wanted to fight whoever would get him a fight against Jones the quickest. So he fought Dominic Reyes, who at the time wasn't really well known. But throughout the buildup of the fight, Weidman was still looking towards Jones more so than his opponent. A lesson that former opponent Luke Rockhold learned earlier that year when he himself moved up to light heavyweight to try to get a shot at Jones while not focusing on the task ahead of him. Chris suffered a similar outcome as his former foe, a brutal knockout at the hands of his underestimated opponent. So, with all this evidence, why is Chris still going to this well of thinking at his advanced age and diminished ability that he is still one of the best and that it's only a matter of time before he wears gold again? Well, only Chris himself can answer that. But personally, I believe it's the only way Chris himself doesn't sink into a deep depression and existential dread of the reality that his best days are behind him. He's not even 40, and the notion that his best days are behind him when it comes to his current career accomplishments and monetary value is a tough and challenging pill for anyone to swallow. Compare this to someone who I think has taken his losses better than anyone I've seen in the sport in a long time, Robert Whittaker. Throughout his achievements and setbacks, the Reaper has shown nothing but down-to-earth and humble self-awareness in any situation. He is a family man who likes to play video games and train martial arts. Win or lose, that's exactly who he is, and no career accomplishments or setbacks can take that away from him. However, Whittaker isn't even 30 years old yet, and still has plenty of time to rebuild himself in his career. Weidman doesn't have that same luxury. And in a sport that is consistently favoring younger and younger fighters, Weidman himself has to feel that pressure of that window of greatness closing faster and faster. So while we may mock it, and understandably doubt and question Weidman's near delusional ideologies about his own self-belief and abilities, this could very well be the only thing keeping Chris focused. Weidman majored in psychology in college, so it's not like the man isn't aware of the tricks his mind is likely playing on him. Chris's mind may ultimately be his undoing, and our eye rolls and scoffs will likely be vindicated. But for Weidman, the risk may be his only way of still obtaining the reward.